by Brothers Grimm. Little brother took his little sister by the hand and said, "Since our mother died, we haven't had a happy hour. Our stepmother beats us every day, and when we go to see her, she kicks us and drives us away. We get hard bread crust to eat, and the dog under the table is better off, for now and then she throws him something good. The pity of it! Oh, if our poor mother knew! Come, let's go out into the wide world together." All day they walked, over meadows, fields, and rocks, and when it rained, little sister said, "God and our hearts are weeping together." At nightfall they came to a large forest, and they were so worn out with misery, hunger, and their long journey that they crawled into a hollow tree and fell asleep. When they woke up the next morning, the sun was high in the sky and shone straight on the hollow tree. Little brother said, "Little sister, I'm thirsty. If there were a spring, I'd go and drink. I think I hear one now." Little brother stood up and took little sister by the hand, and they went looking for the spring. But their wicked stepmother was a witch. She had seen the children go away and had crept after them stealthily as witches do, and had put a spell on all the springs in the forest. When they found a spring that leaped glittering over the stones, little brother wanted to drink. But little sister heard the spring speak as it gurgled and flowed. "If you drink of me, you'll be turned into a tiger. If you drink of me, you'll be turned into a tiger." And little sister cried out, "I beg you, little brother, don't drink. If you do, you'll be turned into a ferocious tiger and you'll tear me to pieces." Little brother didn't drink, though he was very thirsty, and he said, "I'll wait until the next spring." Then when they came to the next spring, it spoke too, and little sister heard it. "If you drink of me, you'll be turned into a wolf. If you drink of me, you'll be turned into a wolf." Little sister cried, "Little brother, I beg you, don't drink. If you do, you'll be turned into a wolf and you'll eat me up." Little brother didn't drink and said, "I'll wait till the next spring, but then I'll have to drink whatever you say. I'm just too thirsty." When they came to the third spring, little sister heard it speak as it gurgled and flowed. "If you drink of me, you'll be turned into a deer. If you drink of me, you'll be turned into a deer." Little sister said, "Oh, little brother, I beg of you, don't drink. If you do, you'll be turned into a deer and run away from me." But little brother had already knelt down, leaned over, and taken a drink of water, and no sooner had the first drops touched his lips than he turned into a fawn. Little sister wept over her poor bewitched little brother, and the fawn wept too and was very sad. Finally the little girl said, "Don't cry, dear fawn. I shall never leave you." She undid her golden garter and tied it round the fawn's neck, and she gathered reeds and plaited them into a soft rope. She fastened the rope to the garter and led the fawn by it, and they went deeper and deeper into the forest. When they had gone a long way, they came to a hut, and she looked in. It was empty, and she thought, "Here we can stop and live." With leaves and moss she made a soft bed for the fawn, and every morning she went out and gathered roots and berries and nuts, and for the fawn she brought tender grass. He ate it out of her hand and gamboled merrily about. At night, when little sister was tired and had said her prayers, she laid her head on the fawn's back. That was her pillow, and she fell into a sweet sleep. If little brother had only had his human shape, it would have been a glorious life. For a time, they were all alone in the forest. But it so happened that the king of the country held a great hunt. The forest rang with the sound of horns, the barking of dogs, and the joyous cries of the hunters. The fawn heard the sounds of the hunt and longed to join in. "Oh, please," he said to little sister, "let me go. I can't bear it any longer." And he pleaded and pleaded until she finally gave in. "But be sure to come home at nightfall," she said. "I shall lock my door against the cruel hunters. You must knock and say, 'Little sister, let me in.' Then I'll know who it is. If you don't say that, I won't open my door." Then the fawn ran off into the forest, and he was so glad to be out in the open that he bounded with joy. The king and his huntsmen saw the beautiful beast and chased him, but they couldn't catch him, and when they thought they had him for sure, he darted into a thicket and vanished. At nightfall, he ran to the hut, knocked, and said, "Little sister, let me in." The door was open, in he leaped, and he slept all night on his soft bed. Next morning, the hunt started in again, and when the fawn heard the horn and the hunter's halloo, he couldn't keep still, and he said, "Open the door, little sister, I shall die if I don't go." Little sister opened the door and said, "But tonight you must come back again and say the same words." When the king and his huntsmen saw the fawn with the golden collar again, they all chased him, but he was too quick and nimble for them. It went on all day, but by nightfall the huntsmen had finally surrounded him, and one of them wounded him slightly on the foot, so that he limped and couldn't run very fast. One of the huntsmen crept after him to the hut and heard him say, "Little sister, let me in," and saw how the door was opened for him and immediately closed again. The huntsman took it all in, went to the king, and told him what he had seen and heard. And the king said, "We shall hunt again tomorrow." Little sister was dismayed when she saw that her fawn was wounded. She washed off the blood and sprinkled herbs on the wound and said, "Now lie down, dear fawn, lie down and get well." The wound was so slight that by morning the fawn didn't feel it anymore, and when he heard the sounds of the hunt, he said, "I can't bear it. I've got to go join. They'll never catch me." The little sister wept and said, "They'll kill you, and here I shall be in the forest all alone and forsaken. No, I won't let you out." "Then I shall die of misery right here," said the fawn. "When I hear the hunting horn, I can't keep still." Well, what was the little sister to do? With a heavy heart, she opened the door, and the fawn bounded happily into the woods. When the king saw him, he said to his huntsmen, "Hunt him all day until nightfall, but let no one harm him." As soon as the sun had set, he said to the huntsman, "Come now and show me the hut." When the king came to the door, he knocked and called out, "Dear little sister, let me in." The door opened, the king went in, and there stood a girl more beautiful than any he had ever seen. She was frightened, but when she saw that it wasn't the fawn, but a man with a golden crown on his head, but the king looked at her tenderly, held out his hand, and said, "Will you come to my palace with me and be my wife?" "Oh, yes," she said, "but the fawn must come with me. I won't ever leave him." The king said, "He shall stay with you as long as you live and want for nothing." Just then the fawn came bounding in. Little sister tied the plaited rope to his collar and took hold of the rope and led him out of the hut. The king took the beautiful girl on his horse with him, and they rode to his palace, where the wedding was celebrated with great splendor. Now she was a queen, and for a long time they lived happily together. The fawn was given the best of care and played about in the palace gardens. But the wicked stepmother, who had driven the children out into the world, thought little sister had been torn into pieces by wild beasts, and that little brother, after being turned into a fawn, had been killed by hunters. When she heard that they were happy and prospering, envy and jealousy settled in her heart and gave her no peace. She had only one thought: how was she to bring misfortune on the two of them after all? Her own daughter, who was as ugly as the night and had only one eye, kept grumbling and finding fault. "And now she's a queen. Some people have all the luck. It should have been me." "Never mind," said the old woman, and bade her take comfort. "When the time comes, I'll know what to do." The time came, and the queen gave birth to a beautiful little boy when the king was out hunting. The old witch disguised herself as a chambermaid, went to the room where the queen was lying, and said, "Come, your bath is ready. It will do you good and give you new strength. Quick, before it gets cold." The daughter was there too, and they carried the feeble queen into the bathroom and put her in the tub, locked the door, and ran away. They had made such a furious fire in the bathroom that the young queen was soon smothered. When that was done, the old woman covered her daughter's head with a nightcap, put her into bed in the queen's place. She also gave her the queen's face and appearance, but she couldn't replace the missing eye. To keep the king from noticing it, she had to lie on the side where she had no eye. When he got home that night and heard that a son had been born to him, he was very happy. He wanted to go to his wife's bedside to see how she was getting along, but the old woman cried out, Don't open the curtains. It's too soon for the queen to look at the light, and she needs rest." The king stepped back and didn't find out that a false queen was lying in his bed. At midnight, everyone was asleep except for the nurse, who was sitting beside the cradle in the nursery. She saw the door open, and she saw the real queen come in. She took the baby out of the cradle, put it to her breast, and suckled it. Then she plumped up the pillow, laid the child down again, and covered it up with its little quilt. And she didn't forget the fawn. She went to the corner where he was lying and stroked his back. Then, without a word, she left the room. In the morning, the nurse asked the guards if anyone had come into the palace during the night, and they said, "No, we haven't seen a soul." After that, the queen came many nights but never said a word. The nurse always saw her but didn't dare mention it to anyone. After a certain time had passed, the queen began to speak when she came in, saying, "How is my child, and how is my fawn? I shall come twice more, then never again." The nurse didn't answer, but when the queen had vanished, she went to the king and told him everything. "Dear God," said the king, "how can this be? I'll stay with the child tonight and keep watch." So that evening he went to the nursery. At midnight the queen appeared again and said, "How is my child, and how is my fawn? I shall come once more and never again." And she suckled the child as usual and vanished. The king didn't dare speak to her, but he kept watch again the next night. Again she spoke, "How is my child, and how is my fawn? I've come this last time, and then never again." Then the king couldn't hold back. He crossed the room at one bound and said, "You can't be anyone but my dear wife." "Yes," she replied, "I am your dear wife." And in that moment, by the grace of God, life was restored to her, and the roses came back to her cheeks. Then she told the king that the wicked witch had done and her daughter had done to her. The king had them brought to trial, and they were sentenced. The daughter was taken to the forest, where she was torn to pieces by wild beasts, and the witch was thrown into the fire and miserably burned. When the witch had burned to ashes, the fawn was freed from the spell and given to his human form again, and little sister and little brother lived happily together to the end of their days. The end.